Tonight, the waiting game continues in Lower Manhattan. A grand jury and New York's district attorney are expected to make the next move in the case involving former President Trump and a hush money probe connected to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Over the weekend, the former president said that he expected to be arrested today. That didn't happen, and sources familiar with the matter say to not expect an indictment until tomorrow at the earliest. If it does happen, we would be in uncharted territory because no U.S. president or ex-president has ever been indicted before. Tonight, we're joined by someone who knows all about high-profile cases, former U.S. Attorney Paul Charlton. Good to see you, and thank you for coming down.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
We're talking about two issues here. One is the alleged hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, and two, how the payments were documented. And this is where it could become, as I understand it, you know better, where it could become a federal offense, is how the payments were documented on the Trump company books. And then finally, possible campaign finance violations. How do you think this all plays out?
Precisely right, Mark. So hush money in and of itself, not a crime. Falsely entering how it is you made that payment, that can be a misdemeanor. And if you put on top of that, if the prosecutors decide that they will include a fraud charge, why you hid the money perhaps to avoid campaign finance disclosure forms, that could be a felony. We aren't going to see any charges today, Tuesday. The grand jury in Manhattan isn't meeting. They are meeting again tomorrow. It is likely, based upon all the reporting, that we're going to see charges tomorrow. And, Mark, what's important to remember is that the prosecutors will not be allowed to talk about charges if they come about. So we'll have to wait to see whether or not the president, as he has in the past, the former President Trump, will be willing to talk about these charges, even if the prosecutors cannot.
Here's what would worry me if I was the prosecutor. How credible do you think a guy like Michael Cohen's testimony is?
A significant worry, and a significant worry for prosecutors across the country every single day. If you want to know how to commit a crime, you talk to criminals. Prosecutors every day bring in criminals and ask those criminals, sometimes force those criminals, to testify against their co-conspirators. So that's not unusual. What you have to do, Mark, what you have to be paying attention to is, what is the corroborating evidence? It's not enough to have somebody who has a conviction for lying, as Mr. Cohen does. You need to have paper, you need to have documents. Those are things that don't lie or forget. If the prosecutors don't have that additional evidence, they're facing a significant hurdle.
And what about the NDA for Stormy Daniels? Does that come into play at all?
I noticed that that's been raised as a defense by people in the public. Whether or not that's a viable defense in court, we'll just have to see. As you know, Mark, in the world of politics, there are those defenses that former President Trump likes to float in the public arena and for politics and for political sake. And then there are those much more narrow, much more difficult defenses that he would have to make, or his lawyers would have to make, if he's charged with a crime.
Let's say for a second, Paul, that this does become, that the indictment does come down. Can you have a jury trial with someone as polarizing as Donald Trump?
Another very interesting question. You don't have to go back too far in time to remember other high-profile, very significant cases. Our former Governor Symington, was charged with a crime, and that trial took place here in Phoenix. And while that isn't a trial on a national scale, it is a high-profile case. And what prosecutors and defense attorneys and the judge will have to do is to try to find jurors who believe that they can be fair and impartial. And for over 200 years, that jury system has worked in big and in small cases.
He has beaten everything that has come his way, from the small to the large. Some of these things are ongoing. Could this be the thing that finally brings Donald Trump down?
It may be, Mark. And here's how we should think about this. We should be reluctant to jump too far ahead of what is happening here. We won't know what the charges are until they're disclosed. We, the public, won't know what weight to give the charges. How significant are those charges? And at the end of the day, Mark, to your point, we're not going to know whether or not former President Trump, if he's charged, is guilty or not guilty until a jury gets to weigh in on that decision.
Tremendous insight as always. Paul Charlton, former U.S. Attorney, thank you for coming down, and hopefully we can have you on again. And if something does happen, give us some context.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thank you.